When I was 21, my brother told me I was a shame to our kin. He whispered it gently, but it cut deep like a knife. A month later, my dad swapped out the locks. My mom left a duffel with my stuff on the stoop. No farewell, no words, just quiet. They called me wild, too emotional, a mess. But really, I just couldn't keep quiet about what they'd done. For 12 years, I vanished. Changed my name, chopped my hair, wiped away every hint of who I'd been. Not out of shame, but because I knew they'd never let me climb if they found me. Then one day, I stepped into a courtroom where my brother was on trial. I didn't say a word. Didn't have to. The judge hesitated, peered to the back, and said, "Hold on, is that Sarah Lane, the mayor?" Head spun around. My brother's jaw dropped, and in that frozen second, all the years I'd spent buried under their silence split wide open. They used to call me a loser. But now, the only thing louder than their quiet was the world finally noticing me. I'm about to share something raw, something that shaped me. I grew up in a small town called Redfield, where everyone knows your business, and I learned early to keep mine close. If this hits you, drop a comment, say where you're from or just a quick hello. It means a lot to know my story's reaching people out there. And if it speaks to you, hit subscribe to keep up with the next part. It helps me keep this going. Thanks. Now, here's the real story. The air in Willow Creek was heavy with summer, and inside the Lane house, it was thick with rules. The family sat around a heavy oak table, its shine catching the dim light of a single bulb overhead. It was a Tuesday dinner, a ritual David Lane enforced like clockwork. At the table's head was David, retired fire chief, head of the house, keeper of all things proper. He raised a glass to Michael, his eldest, as his face popped up on the TV, muted in the background. "That's my boy," he said, voice warm with pride. "County prosecutor for Tilden County, now on local news, a true Lane." Sarah sat at the table's edge, spoon hovering over her plate, eyes low. No one glanced her way. No one asked about her college degree. She'd crossed the stage last month. With a degree in literature. Not law, not business. She hadn't told them when it happened. She knew they wouldn't show. She'd always been the odd one, notebooks full of poems instead of case files, listening to indie bands in her earbuds. She read novels in the park, sketched at dusk, and sat through family dinners like a ghost of someone they once knew. Sarah was 25, sharp in ways they didn't get and never bothered to. Then the flood came. It started with a buzz on her phone, a text from a friend, then another, then a missed call she dreaded hearing. By the time she checked her email, it was everywhere. A private photo from a beach trip was out there, public now. Her face, her laugh, her trust, all stolen, posted, shared. The one who did it? Her ex, spiteful after she walked away. She didn't. No, he'd kept the photo. Sarah barely had time to breathe before her world caved in. Michael saw it first, she found out later. He forwarded it to David with one line, "Handle this before it spreads." Not to shield Sarah, but to protect the Lane name. That night's dinner never happened. David burst into Sarah's room, anger rolling off him like heat. "You think we raised you for this? To be seen like that?" he roared. "I didn't share it," Sarah choked out. "I'm the one who got hurt." "You hurt the Lane name," he shot back, tossing her diploma onto her bed like it was junk mail. "You want to live like that? Do it without my house, my money, my name." Her mom, Ellen, stood in the doorway, clutching a necklace, eyes anywhere but Sarah's. Michael stood rigid, arms crossed, face blank. Sarah looked to him, desperate for a flicker of care. Nothing. She packed in silence, some clothes, her notebooks, her worn blue backpack from high school. Sunlight cut through the blinds, splitting the room into sharp lines. In the living room, David waited. He slid her debit card across the table. "Don't call. Don't come back." Ellen watched from the window as Sarah stepped into the humid evening. No wave, no words, just eyes. The first week, Sarah crashed in her friend's back seat. Then her friend's patience ran dry. By day 9, she was on a bus headed west. Portland, maybe, or somewhere no one would know her old name. On the third night, under a bridge just outside Boise, Sarah did something quiet but final. She pulled out a worn notebook, one with family dates, old recipes, little notes her mom used to tuck in her lunch. She ripped each page slowly and let them burn in a small fire until only ashes remained. The night was calm, the flames soft and eager. Sarah stared into the glow, then glanced at the bus's side mirror nearby. Her reflection looked worn, betrayed, alive, and she whispered, "I'm done losing. I'll start with what's left." Portland was damp that fall, and the chill sank into her clothes, her skin, her hope. She lived in a rundown flat, one of those places with chipped walls, stained counters, and floors that creaked every move into your soul. Rent was low, heat spotty. Her room was just big enough for a thin mattress, a wobbly chair, and a cracked mirror, but it was hers. Sarah worked nonstop. Mornings, she poured coffee at a diner off 12th Street, learning names and orders she'd forget by noon. Afternoons, she mopped floors at a small health clinic, wiping away traces of sick kids and tired dreams. Evenings, she typed numbers for a shipping company that didn't care about her past. At night, when the city hushed and the quiet pressed hard, she wrote. Not stories, just scraps in a secret code she'd made as a kid, a journal only she could read. It was her way of letting pain out without leaving marks. Each word was a truth she wasn't ready to voice. She sketched, too, but rarely. Supplies cost too much. One night, after a rough shift, she used a cheap marker to draw a figure sinking into its own outline. She taped it in a corner behind a sheet. No one saw it. That felt right. Then came the razor. One morning, without thinking twice, she shaved her head in the bathroom, hair falling like leaves into the sink. It wasn't a meltdown. It was a choice. A release. She signed up at a temp agency as S. Lane. Just enough to blend in. Just enough to be someone else. One night at the clinic, during a late shift, Sarah heard yelling in the hall. She peeked out and saw a man, frail and shaken, clutching a kid while a cop loomed with a clipboard. Sign here, the cop snapped. It's done. The man looked lost, maybe scared to understand. Sarah stepped forward, pulse racing. He's not signing, she said, voice firm. Who are you? The cop barked. He's not signing, she repeated. She snatched the form. This isn't even legal. Your system's old. It was a bluff, but it landed. The cop muttered, then walked off. The man sank against the wall, whispering thanks. Later that week, Sarah was called into a cramped office, expecting a pink slip. Instead, she sat across from a woman named Carla Vega, head of Open Haven, a group aiding refugees. Not many would have stepped up like that, Carla said. I know, Sarah replied. Most people still have something to hold on to. Carla grinned. Work for us. Not scrubbing floors. Sarah started low, filing papers, making calls, running errands. But she watched. She learned. She started writing reports, then organizing outreach. Soon, she handled funds and planned events. She took free online classes at night, studied labor laws on weekends, sat in on town halls to learn how power spoke. She stopped saying home out loud. But one day, after finding shelter for a family of 3 escaping war, a volunteer asked, why do this? Sarah didn't pause. I don't have a family to go back to, she said. So I'm making a place where I fit. And somehow, in the cracks between helping others and staying unseen, Sarah started to feel her breath again. 5 years after Sarah tore a deportation notice from a scared father's hands, she stood in a small city hall room in Portland, speaking with a voice so steady it felt like it could carry across oceans. She'd become a known figure in the city's refugee advocacy circles, sharp, fierce, rooted in principles that didn't bend. Her name wasn't shouted from rooftops, but it held weight. People listened when she spoke, even those who pushed back. She was no longer the woman who scrubbed clinic floors. Sarah had earned a seat on the city's Refugee Policy Advisory Board. It wasn't flashy, no limos, no headlines, but it was power, the kind that shapes lives before anyone notices. The change, that day's meeting was heavy. A councilman, suit crisp and voice tighter than his tie, pushed for stricter ID checks at Portland's shelters. Sarah, seated at the table's far end, waited until he was done. Then she leaned in, her voice clear. If the law ignores mercy, she said, it's not law, it's just decoration. The room stilled. A few nodded. Someone in the back clapped softly. The councilman's jaw twitched, but he stayed quiet. Later, in the hallway, a reporter from the Portland Beacon caught up with her, young, quick, eyes sharp. We'd love a profile on you, he said. Local advocate, voice for the voiceless, that angle. Sarah's stomach tightened. No full name, she said. He blinked, confused. Call me S. Lane, and no photos. He paused, then asked, why the shadows? Sarah gave a small smile, her eyes steady. I've been seen wrong before. That night, in her modest studio, better than the crumbling place she'd first landed in, but still simple, she lit a candle. She did this every evening, always by the same photo. It was an old family picture, but she'd scratched out her face with a key. What was left was a smudge where her grin used to be. She whispered. Her nightly words before snuffing the flame, be known for what you build, not what they named you. Some nights, she wondered if her mom still had her old drawings or if her dad ever mentioned her name. She didn't search them online, didn't check their posts. The distance was deliberate, and it was survival. Healing wasn't always moving on. Sometimes it was drawing lines so you could grow free behind them. A coworker at Open Haven, an older woman named Ruth who'd spent years in city programs, once asked her, you ever think about telling people who you really were? Sarah shrugged. They know me. I mean your history, Ruth pressed. Sarah shook her head. I'm not hiding. I'm just not ready to be seen by folks who never saw me. The truth was, she feared more than being found. She feared being twisted into someone else's story, her voice drowned out by their version of her. But progress has a way of finding those who move quietly. Weeks later, Sarah stood at a small stage in a community park. The crowd was modest, maybe 50 people, but their eyes were locked on her. When she said she was running for Oregon State Senate as an independent, her voice didn't waver. I'm not here for a party, she said. I'm here for the people who hold up the world but never get a seat at the table. She didn't mention her past. She didn't talk about sleeping in her friend's car. Her campaign was straightforward, policy heavy, no glossy smiles, just a slogan, let the work talk louder. With that, Sarah stepped into a new fight, not just for others but for herself, for the right to rebuild without begging, without explaining, and without being seen unless she chose it. The news hit like a spark she didn't see coming. Prosecutor. Probed for case rigging. The name beneath it stung, Michael Lane. Sarah hadn't spoken that name in years, hadn't let it sit on her tongue. But there it was, bold and unavoidable. The story spread fast. A tipster claimed Michael had altered evidence in a labor rights case tied to a factory worker facing jail. Activists called it a stab at justice, his allies called it a setup. The stakes were brutal, disbarment, charges, maybe prison. For Sarah, it was like a far-off thunderclap, felt in her bones but too distant to touch. Her team moved quick. Stay out of it, one advisor said. You're a mayor now. This could get ugly. Another added, it's not your mess. But Sarah didn't see it that way. Not because she wanted to help Michael, hell no, but because that courtroom held too many echoes, and one of them wore her face. She booked a flight to Willow Creek, no press, no guards. She told no one. At the courthouse, she wore plain jeans, a dark jacket, and a cap pulled low. She slipped in through a back door and sat in the last row, where the light barely reached. The room was stark, all wood and whispers. Lawyers shuffled. Files. Reporters murmured into recorders. Michael sat up front, polished as ever, posture rigid, but his hands betrayed him, fingers twitching. Then Judge Clara Holt walked in. Sarah knew her from a state summit years back, a no-nonsense woman. With a mind like a blade. Clara's eyes swept the room, then stopped on Sarah. A beat. A squint. Is that Sarah Lane, the mayor? The room froze. Heads turned. Cameras clicked. Reporters hissed into phones. Michael's eyes shot back, wide, disbelieving. Ellen Lane, seated beside him, went pale, her hand clutching her purse. David Lane leaned forward, eyes narrowing, as if trying to unmask a stranger. Sarah didn't move. Didn't blink. Just sat, back straight, her presence louder than any words. The judge coughed, reset, and the trial rolled on. But the air stayed charged. Eyes kept darting back. The mayor was here, and she wasn't here to fix anything, photographers snapped quietly. One got too close until a bailiff pushed him back. Sarah ignored it. She came to watch, not to meddle or mend. She stayed until the break, then left the way she came. No one followed. By the time she reached her hotel, her phone was alive with calls, texts, news alerts. Her name was everywhere. But this time, it wasn't shame pulling her into the light. It was power. She sat by the window, staring at Willow Creek's quiet streets. Her reflection in the glass wasn't a ghost anymore. It was solid, seen. Sarah Lane had returned, not as a sister or daughter, but as something they couldn't ignore. It took less than a day for Sarah's name to flood the news. Her courtroom appearance in Willow Creek had ripped open a story no one had touched in over a decade. Every outlet spun it differently. Oregon mayor's hidden past. Estranged sibling of embattled prosecutor. From disgrace to City Hall, Sarah Lane's comeback. The lost Lane. Is Sarah the true force in this family? Then the real blow landed. Someone dug up the photo. The old, blurry image from that beach trip, one she thought was long buried, resurfaced, grainy but clear enough. Sarah at 25, carefree, betrayed by a phone's click. Headlines turned vicious. One talk show tracked down her ex, who shrugged and said, "We were kids. She knew I had it. Didn't think it'd blow up like this." Sarah watched the clip alone in her office, hands steady, face blank. She didn't blink. Didn't call for a cleanup crew. She let it play, let it sting, because she was done hiding. Her staff panicked. "We need a statement," one said. "We can sue for defamation." "Shut it down," another urged. Sarah shook her head. "Let them stare," she said softly. "I've been seen worse," and walked away. Then David Lane called. His voice, still heavy with authority, hit her like she was 18 again, caught sneaking out. "You're dragging our name for clout," he snapped. "Tarnishing what we built. For your spotlight." Sarah leaned back in her chair, fingers brushing her desk's edge. I carried your name longer than you carried me, she said, calm but cutting. I didn't choose Lane. I kept it to remind me who I'd never be. The line went dead. He hung up. That night, Ellen Lane was rushed to a hospital with a heart scare. Sarah heard through a text from a cousin in Willow Creek. Against every instinct, she caught a late flight. She walked into the hospital room unannounced. Ellen looked frail, not the woman who'd once scolded Sarah for laughing too loud or wearing torn jeans. Just a shadow in a gown, hands shaking under a thin sheet. Their eyes met. Sarah, Ellen whispered, voice thin like cracked glass. If what they say's true, I missed you all these years. Tears spilled down Ellen's cheeks, but Sarah stayed dry-eyed. She sat beside the bed, took her mom's hand gently, and held it without words. Not as a daughter chasing approval, not as someone offering it, just as herself. She didn't say, I forgive you. That was too clean, too simple. Sarah knew healing sometimes came raw, without a bow. When Ellen drifted off, Sarah reached into her bag and left a small sketch on the table. It was one she'd drawn months back, a figure standing on a cliff, shadow stretching endless behind. She'd called it scene. She left no note, just walked out. Back in Portland, the media storm hadn't settled. Reporters staked out her office. Columns guessed at her secrets. Cameras lingered near her apartment. She gave no interviews, no posts, no polished replies, but she didn't shrink either. At her next city meeting, she walked in steady, her team tense, the air thick with unspoken questions. She stepped to the podium. I can't erase what's behind me, she said, voice firm. But I decide what it means going forward. Then she started the agenda. No one dared pry. Her silence, hard-earned and unshakable, spoke louder than any news ticker. The charges hit every channel like a fire catching dry grass. Michael Lane, once Tilden County's star prosecutor, now faced criminal counts for rigging evidence in a labor case tied to a factory worker's rights. Legal allies who'd once backed him slipped away quietly, like they'd never known him. Whispers became quotes. Old colleagues gave vague statements, calling the claims troubling and a breach of trust. Michael's name, once a badge of pride, now carried weight of a different kind. Sarah watched from Portland, face unreadable, then her phone lit up. Ellen's name on the screen. Her voice was faint, trembling like a leaf in wind. Sarah, please, she said, already breaking. Come home, just once. Sit with us. Sarah didn't answer right away. Later, a message came from David. No call, just a text, we should talk. 12 years. 12 years of pretending she was gone, and now they knew her number. Against her gut, Sarah said yes. That Thursday, she pulled up to the Lane house's dusk. Settled. The porch seemed smaller, worn by time. Inside, the air smelled of polish and nerves. They were all there. Ellen opened the door, her smile shaky, eyes smudged with tears. David stood back, rigid in a pressed shirt. Michael sat at the table's far end, head low, fingers twisting a napkin. Sarah's old chair waited, reupholstered in stiff vinyl. A new skin on old wounds. The meal was heavy, tamales, rice, beans, a bottle of soda no one touched. Ellen tried to bridge the quiet with old stories. Remember when you doodle on the placemats, she said, voice too bright. David chimed in, saw your campaign signs. Real sharp. Read one of your talks. Good work. Sarah sat still, watching, weighing. Finally, Michael spoke, voice low. I screwed up, he said. Didn't think it'd go this far. There it was, bare and small. Then the shift came. We were hoping, Ellen said, hand reaching but stopping short, you could talk to the state attorney. Just a word or two. Nothing big. For family. Sarah looked at them, Ellen, eyes clinging to hope like a frayed rope. David, voice soft but eyes hard. Michael, once her judge, now just a man unraveling. She set her spoon down. The clink rang like a gavel. If I wasn't mayor, she asked, voice even, would you still call me yours? Silence swallowed the room. Sarah stood. The air felt cleaner as she pushed her chair back. The vinyl creaked. I kept your name, she said, quiet but firm. But I built my life without you. She turned, jacket brushing her knees, and walked out. Ellen's voice cracked, Sarah, wait. But Sarah didn't pause. She stepped into the cool night, the weight of that house lifting off her shoulders. For the first time, she carried only herself. The text came at 4:07 a.m. Sarah jolted awake, her phone buzzing hard. One photo, then another, then a rush of them. Fuzzy screenshots of that old beach trip image. Emails from her early 20s, raw and private. A grainy shot of her sitting outside a Portland shelter, year 1, eyes red. No message, no sender. She stared at the screen in the dark, pulse even. Not panic, just focus. By 8 a.m., her communications lead knocked, face tight, and slid a tablet across her desk. There it was, a blog post gaining traction, titled "The Real Sarah, Leaked Past of Oregon's Mayor." She didn't wince. At 11 a.m., a hushed call came from a friend now at the state attorney's office. Off the record, they said, "Your dad's been digging, asking about your background." A pause. "He's looking for dirt." Sarah shut her eyes briefly, then opened them, sharp as steel. This wasn't care. It was a jab, maybe a warning. That evening, instead of dodging the hit, Sarah walked into it. The next morning, she stood at a podium in Portland. No banners, no guards, just her. Behind her, a wall of drawings from refugee kids she'd helped over the years, taped up unevenly. She wore a plain gray coat, no makeup, hair pulled back. A woman bare but unbreakable. "We know how power moves," she started, voice steady. "It's not always fists or fines. Sometimes it's whispers, old photos, or invites to dinner that feel like traps." She paused. "This bill's for anyone whose past was weaponized by the people who should have had their back." She unveiled the Truth Shield Act, a law to punish attempts to blackmail public figures, activists, or officials with personal history, family ties, or old mistakes. It was raw, direct, and aimed like an arrow. She named no names, but every newsroom knew. Every politician knew. Every lane knew. The press erupted, but this time, they didn't tear her down. Columns called the bill overdue. Op-eds praised her nerve against family betrayal. Headlines shifted, Mayor Lane redefined strength. She faced her kin. Now she fights for the silenced. David Lane went quiet. Ellen stopped calling. Michael sent no messages. No one pushed back. Sarah walked Portland streets days later, no cameras trailing. Just a woman in a black scarf, tea in hand, crossing 9th and Oak under pale autumn light. No one stopped her. No one shouted her name. She thought, "This is how I want it. I don't need their eyes to keep going." At noon the next week, her assistant tapped her door. "Ma'am, Michael Lane's downstairs." Sarah looked up from her papers. "He book a time?" "No, just asked to see you." "Alone?" A long beat. Sarah nodded. "Let him in." She cleared her desk, leaving only a mug of water. No staff, no recorders, no security. Michael walked in, a ghost of the man from old courtrooms. No tie, eyes sunken, wearing a faded jacket and jeans. His shoulders sagged like they carried years of bad choices. Sarah stayed silent. The quiet grew heavy, an old kind of quiet they both knew. Michael sat across from her. "I don't know where to begin," he said, voice low. "But I know I broke what we could have been as family before I even saw I was scared of you." His voice cracked, but he kept going. "I don't want jail. But I'm not here to beg you to fix it. I just needed to say it. I pushed you down to stand taller, and now I look up, and you're somewhere I can't even touch." Sarah watched him, calm, unreadable. "You didn't break me, Michael," she said, voice even. "You just forgot I was there. And when you're forgotten long enough, you learn how to be impossible to ignore." Tears ran down Michael's face. "Mom thinks you'll pull me out of this." Sarah tilted her head, glancing out her office window at Portland's gray skyline. "I'm not here to save anyone," she said. "I saved myself so no one could bury me again." Michael nodded, slow, his voice softer. "Thanks for not hating me more than I've earned." Sarah didn't answer. No embrace, no absolution. Just a real quiet between two people who once shared a table, a last name, and years of unseen scars. As Michael stood to go, his sleeve grazed her desk. There, under a stack of files, was a folded note, a draft of a leniency plea Sarah had written weeks ago and shredded that morning after recalling a different moment from 12 years back, one where a brother had texted their dad, "She's the one." In the photo. The door clicked shut. Sarah sat back, opened a folder on tenant rights reform, and started typing. Some weights, she thought, you can't rewrite. But you can choose when to drop them. The summit was unlike any Sarah had spoken at. No glitz, no fanfare, just a room full of buried truths ready to breathe. A state conference on truth-telling reform, panels of whistleblowers who'd exposed fraud in companies, governments, and, hardest of all, families. People who'd been siblings, spouses, workers, punished not for lies but for truths too close to home. Sarah stood backstage as a video played, blurred faces, altered voices, text recounting betrayals by parents, partners, kin. The host introduced her plainly, Mayor Sarah Lane, advocate, reformer, sister. She stepped into a silence that pulsed with meaning. Her voice was clear from the first word. "I was once called a failure," she said. "Then I was erased. Then I was cornered. Not with knives, but with memories." The room leaned in. "I'm not here to make anyone say sorry. I'm here so my kids one day won't have to choose between their truth and their family." She paused, eyes scanning the crowd. They landed on Ellen, second row, smaller than before, hands knotted in her lap, tears silent on her cheeks. Far back, nearly lost in dim light, stood David. No badge, no polish, just a man in a worn shirt, arms crossed like a wall that no longer held. Michael wasn't there, but an empty chair up front had a sign, reserved for who he might have been. Sarah smiled faintly at the crowd's soft gasps. Then came the turn. "I'm launching a new policy," she said. "The Open Ties Act, or what I call the Kin Truth Clause. It let public workers report family conflicts without fear of backlash, protecting those who spoke out, not just from strangers but from their own blood." "Silence," Sarah said, "shouldn't be the cost of family." The press grabbed it like kindling. Headlines read, "A leader who names the scar before it festers." 8 months later, Sarah walked into a modest community hall in North Portland. No cameras, no banners, no fuss. Just 30 metal chairs and a mix of locals expecting another panel on city projects. No one thought the mayor would show up in sneakers, a loose sweater, and no entourage. She didn't head straight to the front. She stacked a few chairs, grabbed a cup of weak coffee, and nodded at folks like she was one of them, because, in a way, she was. When it was time, she stepped up. No title flashed on a screen, no big intro, just 2 words scrawled on a whiteboard behind her: "Fearless choices. People always ask," she started, voice soft but firm, "how I got here without my family's help." A pause. "I didn't get here. I just stopped waiting for them." The room chuckled, warm and real. "We don't pick our kin," she went on, "but we pick what we carry forward and what we leave behind." A man in his 40s, hands rough from work, raised a hand. "What if they change one day?" he asked, voice heavy. "What if they come back different?" Sarah tilted her head, thinking. "I'd hear their story," she said, steady. "But mine's already told, and I'm not rewriting it." The crowd went quiet, the kind of quiet that lands deep. That's when she saw him. David, leaning against the back wall. No jacket, no air of command, just an old man watching his daughter speak from a place he'd never helped her reach. Sarah kept talking, but her eyes met his for a second, not angry, not wounded, just clear. When the talk wrapped, people clapped, not out of duty but respect. As they scattered, David shuffled forward. Few noticed. No one recorded. He waited. By the mic Sarah stood still, face calm. "I never got my daughter," he said, voice low, rough. A long breath. "But today, I saw maybe I don't need to. Maybe I just need to say she did what I couldn't. No sorry, no excuses, just that." Sarah didn't tear up. Didn't step forward. She dipped her head, a nod full of calm, not defeat. Outside, rain tapped the pavement. Kids shouted in a nearby lot, dodging puddles. Sarah stepped into the damp air. She didn't look back, didn't wave, just walked alone but not lonely through the soft gray light. She'd once lived to be noticed. Now, she'd learned to notice herself. The hardest fights are the ones you wage inside, against the pull of what was. Healing isn't about erasing what happened. It's about refusing to drag it further. We don't choose where we start, but we choose where we stand. Sometimes standing solo is where the real strength begins. The news kept churning Michael's case. His indictment was final, splashed across every station like a slow-burning wreck. Michael Lane, once Tilden County's golden prosecutor, now faced prison for tampering with evidence in that factory workers' case. Old allies vanished, their silence louder than any statement. Colleagues muttered, "Shameful," to reporters, keeping their own hands clean. The Lane name, once a shield, now felt like a weight. Sarah watched from Portland, her face a mask. Then Ellen called again. Her voice was thinner now, like it might break mid-sentence. "Sarah, please," she said, voice wet. "Just come back. Once. For coffee, anything." Sarah didn't reply right away. Later, a text from David pinged, "Let's meet." 12 years of nothing, and now they kept reaching. Sarah's gut screamed no, but she agreed. She arrived at the Lane house on a chilly Saturday. The porch sagged more than she remembered, paint peeling at the edges. Inside, the air was thick with cleaner intention. Ellen greeted her, hands trembling, smile fragile. David stood stiff, shirt tucked too tight. Michael sat on the couch, eyes down, picking at his sleeve. Sarah's old spot on the sofa was the same, but the cushions were new, stiff under fresh fabric. The table held coffee, muffins, juice, untouched. Ellen tried to fill the quiet. "You used to love sketching in the yard," she said, too eager. David added, "Your campaign ads were solid. Heard one of your speeches. Not bad." Sarah sat, observing, silent. Michael finally spoke, voice barely there. "I messed up bad," he said. "Didn't see it going this far." The words hung, small and heavy. Then Ellen shifted. "We thought," she said, hand hovering near Sarah's, "maybe you could talk to the judge. Just a note. For us." Sarah's eyes moved from Ellen's pleading face to David's calculated calm, to Michael, once her accuser, now shrunk into himself. She set her mug down, the clink sharp in the quiet. If I wasn't mayor, she asked, voice steady, would you still want me here? No one answered. The silence was louder than words. Sarah stood, the air lighter with each step. The new cushions squeaked. I kept your name, she said, soft but final. But I made my life without you. She walked out, coat brushing her legs. Ellen's voice broke, Sarah, please. But Sarah didn't turn. The night air was cold, clean. She carried nothing but herself. Back in Portland, the media hadn't calmed. Reporters lingered near her office, fishing for quotes. Blogs rehashed her past. Sarah stayed quiet but didn't hide. At her next council meeting, she walked in, head high, her team braced for questions. She opened with, the past doesn't get a vote in my future, then moved to budget talks. No one pressed her. Her silence, owned and fierce, outshouted any headline. A week later, Sarah spoke at a small vigil for displaced families. The crowd was tiny, maybe 20, but their eyes held her. She didn't talk about herself, only policy, housing, rights, hope. But her presence said more. Afterward, a kid, maybe 10, handed her a crayon drawing of a house with a big sun. Sarah smiled, tucked it in her bag. That night, in her apartment, she lit her candle by the scratched-out family photo. She whispered, be known for what you do. The flame flickered, and for the first time, the quiet felt like home. The storm didn't stop. Another leak hit, a voice memo from her 20s, venting about her family, raw and unfiltered. It spread fast. Sarah didn't flinch. She let it burn, knowing she'd already walked through worse fires. Her team offered spin, lawsuits, denials. She said no. Let it breathe, she told them. I'm not that girl anymore. And in that choice, Sarah Lane stood taller than any shadow her family could cast. The leaks kept coming, each one sharper than the last. A blurry video from Sarah's college days surfaced, her laughing too loud at a party, unaware of the phone pointed her way. Then came old texts, private rants about her family, sent to a friend who'd long since faded. The worst was a photo of her at 26, slumped on a Portland curb after a 16-hour shift, face raw with exhaustion. No context, just her vulnerability splashed online. The headlines nod, Mayor Lane's wild past. Sarah's secrets unraveled. Can Portland trust her? Sarah sat in her office, scrolling through the noise, her expression still as stone. She didn't call her team. Didn't draft a statement. She let it spread, because running from shadows only made them chase harder. Her advisor knocked, voice tight. We can push back, he said. Legal action, maybe a press conference. Sarah shook her head. No, she said, calm. I've survived worse than their eyes. That afternoon, David texted again, this is on you. Stop dragging our name. Sarah stared at the words, then set her phone face down. Hours later, Ellen left a voicemail, voice trembling. Sarah, it's too much. Please, just talk to us. Sarah didn't call back. 12 years of silence, and now they wanted her voice. To fix their mess, the next day, Sarah stood at a community center in East Portland. No stage, no mic, just a circle of 25 people, workers, parents, kids, talking housing reform. She wore jeans, a plain jacket, hair loose. When a woman asked about the leaks, the room tensed. Sarah met her gaze. My past isn't a secret, she said. It's just not my chain. The woman nodded, and the talk moved on. That night, a local paper ran a piece, Lane faces ghosts, keeps focus. For once, the story wasn't about her fall, it was about her standing. Then Michael's trial took a turn. New evidence dropped, emails showing he'd pressured a witness in the factory case. The news hit like a brick through a window. His law license was suspended, his allies gone quiet. The Lane name, once polished, now felt like rust. Sarah watched the coverage in her apartment, candle flickering by that scratched-out family photo. Her phone buzzed, Ellen again. He's lost everything, her mom said, voice cracking. Come home, Sarah. Just once. Sarah's jaw tightened. She didn't answer, but she went. On a rainy Friday, she drove to Willow Creek. The Lane house looked smaller, its paint chipped, porch creaking under her steps. Inside, the air was heavy with coffee and guilt. Ellen hugged her, too tight, eyes wet. David sat at the kitchen table. Shoulders hunched, no longer the fire chief who commanded rooms. Michael stood by the window, thinner, eyes hollow. The table was set with pie, water, cups, no one touched them. Ellen tried to lighten the mood. You used to love my apple pie, she said, voice forced. David added, your work's getting noticed. Saw an article. Impressive. Sarah sat, hands folded, watching. Michael spoke, voice barely above a whisper. I ruined it all, he said. Didn't mean for it to go this far. The words Landed, fragile and late. Ellen reached for Sarah's arm. We were thinking, she said, you could write a letter to the court. Just a small one. For him. Sarah looked at them, Ellen's desperate hope, David's guarded eyes, Michael's broken stare. She pushed her chair back, the scrape loud in the quiet. If I wasn't mayor, she asked, voice steady, would you still see me as family? Silence swallowed the room. Sarah stood. I kept Lane, she said, soft but firm. But I built me without you. She walked out, rain soaking her coat. Ellen called after her, Sarah, don't. But Sarah kept moving, the house's weight gone from her shoulders. Back in Portland, the leaks hadn't stopped. A tabloid posted an old journal page, stolen from her college years, full of angry scrawls about her family. Sarah let it burn. Her team begged for a response. No, she said. I'm not that story anymore. Instead, she poured herself into work, pushing a bill for renter protections, meeting with displaced families, speaking at small vigils. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was armor. A month later, Sarah spoke at a state forum on accountability. The room was plain, 40 people, no frills. The topic, protecting those who expose truth, even when it's family. She stood at a podium, no notes, just her. I was called a traitor once, she said, voice clear. Then forgotten. Then used. Not with threats, but with my own history. The crowd leaned in. I'm here so no one has to pay for their truth with their name. She announced an expansion of the Truth Shield Act, adding safeguards for private citizens, not just officials. Family, she said, shouldn't be a gag order. Ellen was there, back row, hands clasped, face streaked with quiet tears. David sat beside her, no badge, no pride, just a man out of place. Michael's seat was empty, his trial ongoing. Sarah's eyes passed over them, not lingering. The room clapped, soft but real. Headlines followed, Lane's law shields the brave. Mayor turns pain into policy. For once, her name wasn't tied to scandal or shame. It stood for something solid. After. As people left, Ellen approached. Sarah, she whispered, voice thin. I'm sorry. Sarah nodded, not warm, not cold. I know, she said. David hung back, said nothing, his eyes on the floor. Sarah didn't wait for more. She walked out, the air crisp, Portland's lights smudging in the rain. She didn't need their words. She'd built her own, that night, in her apartment. Sarah lit her candle. The scratched-out photo stared back. She whispered, be known for what you make. The flame held steady. For the first time, the quiet wasn't empty, it was hers. She'd once craved their gaze. Now, she saw herself clear. The fight wasn't over, but the weight was lighter. Some battles, she thought, you win by choosing what to carry. And some, you win by laying it down. The storm didn't quit. Another leak hit, a voice recording from Sarah's early 20s, her venting about the Lanes, raw and unguarded, sent to a friend who'd betrayed her trust. It went viral, dissected on talk shows, captioned with Mayor's bitter roots. Then came a blurry photo of her at a Portland diner, year 2, wiping tables, eyes tired. The headlines clawed, Sarah Lane's humble facade. Mayor's past haunts. Her rise. Sarah sat alone in her office, screen glowing, face still. She didn't flinch. Didn't call for damage control. She let it rage, knowing hiding only fed the fire. Her team scrambled. We can sue, one said. Or release a statement. Sarah shook her head. No, she said, voice low. I'm done running from their version of me. That night, David emailed, you're killing us. Stop this. Ellen left a message, voice frail, Sarah, please, let's talk. Sarah didn't reply. 12 years of their silence, and now they wanted her to hush their shame. The next morning, Sarah stood at a small rally in Portland's waterfront park. No stage, just 30 people, families, workers, kids, there for a tenant rights push. She wore a plain coat, boots scuffed from walking the city. When someone asked about the leaks, the air tightened. My past isn't my cage, she said, eyes steady. It's my proof I can stand. The crowd nodded, and the talk shifted to policy. A local blog posted later, Lane turned scandal into strength. The story, for once, wasn't her fall, it was her fight. Michael's case collapsed further. The court ruled against him, guilty on evidence tampering, sentenced to 3 years. The Lane name, once a beacon in Willow Creek, was now a whisper of disgrace. News anchors lingered on his mugshot, colleagues distanced themselves, and the family's legacy crumbled. Sarah watched from Portland, her face a mask. Ellen called, sobbing. He's broken, Sarah. Come see us, please. Sarah's hand hovered over her phone, then set it down, but she went. On a cold Sunday, she drove to Willow Creek. The Lane house felt shrunken, its windows dim, porch sagging. Inside, the air was thick with dust and regret. Ellen opened the door, eyes red, hugging. Sarah too long. David sat in an armchair, smaller without his old swagger. Michael wasn't there, already in custody. The living room held tea, cookies, a pitcher of water, untouched. Ellen tried to spark memories. You loved my shortbread, she said, voice thin. David added, your bills are making waves. Read about one. Not bad. Sarah sat, hands still, watching. Ellen's voice broke. We thought, she said, you could speak at Michael's appeal. Just a word. For us. Sarah's gaze moved from Ellen's trembling hope to David's guarded stare. She set her cup down, the clink sharp. If I wasn't mayor, she asked, voice even, would you still call me yours? Silence choked the room. Sarah stood. I kept Lane, she said, quiet but final. But I built my life without you. She walked out, the door soft behind her. Ellen's voice cracked. Sarah, wait. But Sarah kept going, the night air crisp, her steps light. In Portland, the leaks slowed but didn't stop. A gossip site posted an old letter Sarah wrote to Ellen at 25, unsent, full of pain. She let it burn. Her team pushed for a response. No, she said. I'm not their story. She focused on work, passing renter protections, meeting displaced families, speaking at quiet forums. Her silence wasn't retreat, it was PowerPoint. 3 months later, Sarah spoke at a state summit on justice reform. The room was simple, 50 people, no fanfare. The focus, shielding those who expose family wrongs. She stood at a mic, no script. I was called a shame, she said, voice clear. Then erased. Then hunted. Not with fists, but with my own past. The crowd leaned in. I'm here so no one's truth costs them their place. She unveiled the Kin Voice Act, protecting whistleblowers from family retaliation, public or private. Blood, she said, shouldn't silence you. Ellen sat in the third row, Freilier, hands knotted, tears quiet. David was there, back corner, no suit, just a man out of place. Michael's absence hung heavy, an empty seat up front marked reserved. Sarah's eyes passed over them, steady. The room clapped, raw and real. Headlines flared, Lane's law heals. Old wounds. Mayor turns betrayal into hope. Her name stood tall, untied to disgrace, after Ellen approached, voice barely there. Sarah, I failed you. Sarah nodded, calm. I know, she said, not warm, not cold. David lingered behind, silent, eyes low. Sarah didn't wait. She walked out, Portland's drizzle cool on her skin. She didn't need their apologies. She'd carved her own peace. That night, in her apartment, Sarah lit her candle by the scratched-out photo. She whispered, be known for what you build. The flame didn't waver. The quiet was hers, full, not empty. She'd once lived for their gaze. Now, she saw herself, whole, unbroken. The next week, Sarah walked into a Portland shelter, no press, no title. She helped serve meals, sat with families, listened. A kid gave her a paper flower, lopsided but bright. She tucked it in her pocket. Later, at a city council meeting, she pushed a budget for more shelters. Her voice didn't shake. Her past didn't either, the leaks faded. The world moved on. Sarah didn't. She kept working, speaking, building. Her name wasn't a headline anymore, it was a promise. She walked Portland streets, coffee in hand, under soft winter light. No one stopped her. No one needed to. She thought, I don't need their memory to keep going. If this moved you, drop a thought below. If you want more, subscribe to stay close. Thanks for being here.